The second time my parents disowned me hurt less than the first, and somehow that was the most painful part of all. I remember standing in their living room watching my mother avoid my eyes while my father repeated the same sentence he had used years earlier. "You are no longer welcome in this family." The first time they said those words, I was 19 and terrified. The second time, I was 31 and exhausted. And deep down, I think they hated that I didn't break in front of them anymore. Growing up, my younger brother Tyler was always protected from consequences. My parents called him sensitive, which usually meant everyone else had to sacrifice comfort to keep him happy. If Tyler failed a class, teachers were unfair. If he lost a job, his bosses were jealous. If he lied, someone else must have misunderstood him. I spent most of my childhood learning that peace in our house depended on silence. The first time they disowned me happened after Tyler crashed my car during college and blamed me for stressing him out. My parents demanded I apologize to him because he was already struggling emotionally. When I refused, they told me to leave their house immediately. I spent almost 2 years sleeping on friends' couches and working diner shifts before they finally contacted me again. Not to apologize. To pretend none of it ever happened. My mother cried on the phone about how families shouldn't stay divided. My father offered awkward small talk like we'd simply lost touch naturally. I was young enough back then to believe reconciliation mattered more than accountability. So I came back. For a while, things almost felt normal again. I got an office job, rented a small apartment nearby, and started rebuilding trust with them carefully. I even convinced myself Tyler had matured. That illusion lasted until my grandmother died. She left behind a modest inheritance divided equally among her grandchildren. Nothing life-changing, but enough to help me finally think about buying a small condo someday. Tyler received his share and burned through it within months. Then he discovered mine was still untouched. One evening, my parents invited me over for dinner. The moment I walked inside, I recognized the tension immediately. Tyler sat quietly at the table staring at his hands while my mother forced nervous smiles. I already knew. My father explained Tyler had fallen behind financially and needed temporary help. My mother insisted family should support one another during difficult times. Then Tyler finally spoke. He said Grandma would have wanted me to share my inheritance with him because he had children and more responsibilities. I laughed before I could stop myself. Not because it was funny, but because I suddenly realized nothing had changed at all. I calmly refused. The room turned cold instantly. Tyler accused me of being selfish. My mother started crying. My father reminded me how much they sacrificed raising me. Within minutes, the conversation transformed into an attack on my character instead of a discussion about money. Then Tyler crossed the line completely. He claimed I owed the family because they had forgiven me after the first estrangement years earlier. Forgiven me, as if surviving their rejection had been some crime they generously overlooked. Something inside me finally became still. I reached into my bag, pulled out a folder, and placed it carefully on the table. For nearly 3 years, I had quietly prepared for this exact moment. After rebuilding contact with my parents, I noticed a pattern. Tyler constantly borrowed money using emotional manipulation while my parents pressured relatives into silence. Several family members privately complained about unpaid debts and broken promises, but nobody wanted confrontation. So I started documenting everything. Not for revenge at first. For protection. Inside the folder were copies of messages from Tyler requesting loans he never repaid, emails from relatives describing financial manipulation, and records showing my parents repeatedly pressured family members into covering Tyler's debts while hiding the truth from others. But the final document mattered most. 6 months earlier, my parents had asked me to co-sign a business loan for Tyler. I refused quietly and consulted an attorney afterward because something felt wrong. The attorney discovered Tyler was already facing potential fraud investigations connected to unpaid contractor payments from a failed business venture. If I had signed those papers, I could have been financially trapped for years. I watched my father's face lose color as he realized what I knew. Then I calmly explained that I had already submitted copies of certain financial records to protect myself legally if Tyler ever attempted to involve me in future debt disputes. Nobody spoke. For once, Tyler looked afraid instead of confident. My mother whispered that I was tearing the family apart. But that time, I didn't accept the blame. I told her the family had been breaking for years every time they protected Tyler from consequences while sacrificing everyone else around him. Then my father stood up and repeated those familiar words again. "You are no longer welcome in this family." Except this time, I smiled softly. Because unlike the 19-year-old girl they once threw out into the world terrified and alone, I now had my own career, my own apartment, my own savings, and enough self-respect to stop begging for love that always came with conditions. I stood up quietly, wished them well, and walked out before anyone could say another word. That was 3 years ago. Since then, several relatives cut contact with Tyler after learning the truth about his financial schemes. My parents still defend him from everyone, though I hear the stress has isolated them badly. Sometimes people ask if I regret leaving for good. I don't, because the second time they disowned me, I finally understood something that changed my life forever. Being rejected by people who only love the version of you they can control is not a loss. It's freedom.